Great, thanks so much, Catherine, and welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. As Catherine said, we're going to focus in on managing workers on the farm. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we are the from the Canadian Agricultural HR Council. We're a national nonprofit. We work with industry stakeholders to help identify and address HR issues in Canada. And I personally grew up on my family farm and in our family farm equipment dealership in southwestern Ontario. I live in Ottawa now, but have been working in HR and for over 20 years, a lot of that time in agriculture as well. So for those of you that haven't joined us in the past, I'd like to take a few minutes just to identify why it's important to have good HR management practices on the farm. When we look at some of the national numbers that we do as part of our research, it's clear that there's a labor shortage, and I'm sure that you're feeling that on a day-to-day basis in your own operations. You can see from the numbers that there is this labor shortage is forecasted to increase, and the impact that that's having on the industry from a sales point of view right now is around $2 billion in lost sales. So definitely nationally a reason to be looking at how we're taking care of the workers we do have and how we can attract some more workers to the industry. Nova Scotia obviously is not alone in this labor and very similar to what's happening across the country from the national point of view. When we look specifically at the Nova Scotia agriculture workforce, close to 30% is coming from foreign workers, which is really helping with that shortage. But even with that, there's still over 7,000 workers or jobs going unfilled and forecasting that to grow over time as well. And this impacts the industry in your province with about a $33 million loss in sales due to these labor shortages. That's what was reported in 2018. And so looking forward and the impact of that things like COVID and the pandemic and that kind of thing have had as well, we do not think that that shortage, sales shortage would be any different. It may be actually more. So just to touch on why HR management is important in the management of your people. When your people are what make up your farm operation, and having skilled and effective employees are going to help your farm success as well as your profitability. It can be really costly to have a lot of turnover or to not have a strong workforce that is doing the work on your farm effectively, productively, efficiently. It can, without good HR management practices, you can have increased health and safety issues, accidents, and things like that as well. As well with that labor shortage, and anytime really, you want to be having good HR practices so that you can attract the best workers from your community to want to work with you and become that employer of choice. This becomes even more important when there's fewer workers available to apply for the jobs that you have open. And as well, there is a legal obligation for you to have good HR management practices as well. Both federal and provincial legislation outline requirements and obligations as an employer. And so by making sure you have those good HR management practices in place, you're protecting your own business from these legal issues, and you're also keeping your workers safe. So today's focus is really on ways to manage your workers and develop your workers. And so why is it important to manage people and to have good management practices of your people? By providing a good structure for your workforce, your workers are going to know what's expected of them. They're going to know how they're performing and where they can improve. They're going to know opportunities to grow within your organization as well. And they're just going to have a feeling that their work is valued and that they're valued to you and your operation. Good people management skills can have a really dramatic impact on your business results as well. And it can end up with saving money by increasing productivity, improving safety, and reducing that turnover. And so part of the people management is really what HR management is. There's many different components of it. And it does start right from the time that you go through your recruitment and selection process. It should go through the way that you do your HR planning. You're making sure your legislation's in place, you have good policies in place that are communicated to your employees, training and development's available for your employees. You have a performance management process in place, again, so they know how they're doing and where they can improve and where they can grow. Succession planning, compensation, benefits, wellness, and safety, all of these things contribute to how you manage your workers. We're going to touch on a few of these areas today and give examples on how they impact managing your workers. As we mentioned as well, and we talked a little bit more in detail in a previous webinar, managing your people well will have a real positive impact on your bottom line as well. Having employee turnover is costly, and on our website, there's a cost of turnover calculator that you can use for free, where you can put in, answer a few questions, and it'll give you what that cost of turnover is. But just when you look at it on a general level, when someone leaves, you have to replace them. So there's the cost of the hiring process to replace that person, orientation and training, getting them up to speed, making sure that they know the job. That takes your time or one of your manager's time to do that training. There's lost time and productivity as well. It may impact the other workers from an overtime point of view, or picking up the slack while you're trying to replace the person. As well, when someone leaves, there could be separation costs that you're paying out. So these are things that you need to consider, and that have managing these things can help have a positive impact on your bottom line. Also, the indirect costs are things like disruptions in the team, and if someone's always leaving and new people are coming, that team morale and cohesion can be disrupted. The reputation of your organization, as we mentioned previously, trying to be that employer of choice. If you have a constant turnover of staff, you're not going to attract people to want to come and work with you, because they're going to think that there's an issue or it's not a great place to work. So all of these things really build into the cost of turnover, but also impacts your ability to attract and retain going forward. So one of the key components of managing people is having some good HR policies in place. And this goes to that structure of good HR management practices. If you have good HR management practices, you're going to have good people management practices in place as well. And the HR policies are one way to give that structure. And they provide guidelines. There's expectations are communicated to employees. It provides structure to what, how things go. If someone wants to take vacation, they can go to the policy and understand how to take vacation and how to apply for it, that kind of thing. It provides guidance on if you have to have disciplinary action or you're providing feedback from a performance point of view. It clearly outlines compensation in your compensation policies. So all of these collection of HR policies really provide that standard of acceptable behavior. It helps your managers and supervisors resolve problems because you have something to refer to. It should address the needs of your organization and make sure that they're also in compliance with employment standards and legislation. So things that are covered under HR policies are the planning side of things, diversity, human rights, accommodation, and equity, your recruitment, selection, and hiring process, training, development, workplace health and safety, compensation and benefits, personnel records, employee departures and retirements, and employee relations. The Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council has a resource in our AgriHR toolkit, which I will provide you with the code at the end of this. But in that AgriHR toolkit is an employee handbook, which has templates for all of these policies that you're able to download and customize to your own operation. We've done this so that you're not having to start from scratch or be overwhelmed by the type of policies or the wording that you need to have in place. So by all means, if you don't have these HR policies in place yet, don't hesitate to use the ones that are available to you in the AHRC HR toolkit. It's also important that the policies you're creating are written in inclusive language and that you're meeting your human rights requirements, but also ensuring that the policies are written in a way that's clear and that sends a clear message about the values of the organization. It will help you attract and retain workers of many different types, backgrounds, and abilities, and will ensure that your policies are there for everyone of your workers. Another aspect of managing and developing workers is training. You want to ensure that your workers have the skills and knowledge to do the work that you're asking them to do. And that in many cases means that you're going to have to take some time to provide some training. And why is this important? It helps ensure that the workers can perform their jobs at the level that you're hoping, wanting them to or needing them to from a business goal point of view. It can increase productivity. It definitely has an impact on creating a safer work environment. It can help with the turnover rates and keeping those turnover rates low. And it also shows that you're invested in improving your employee well-being and engagement. And it can help career path workers, or help develop an entry-level worker, for example, into a more experienced role, and potentially even into a supervisory role or whatever your operation may have. But by ensuring that the training is there and the development is there, you will have less turnover and a more productive, happier workforce. So activities around this training can start really right at the very beginning with orientation and onboarding to make sure that your new employees know where to find manuals, how to do the work, who to ask questions to, that they feel welcomed, all that kind of thing. Really starts on day one and should continue over their employment with you. It can take place with on-the-job training, and depending on the type of role that they have, it may also you may also provide access to external training as well. And we'll walk through some of that training process. So what is training? As I mentioned, it really covers a wide range of activities, from everything from orientation or that onboarding to the on-the-job training. And you always want to make sure that you're evaluating and documenting the training as well. It can go beyond on-the-job training, as I mentioned as well, but anything that you're providing to your employees, you should be documenting and evaluating if it's having the impact that you're hoping it would have. And you should also be getting the feedback from the trainee or the employee that you're providing the training to ensure that it's meeting their needs as well, because you don't want to be investing in time and effort and money into training if it's not meeting the business needs or the needs of the employee. And as I mentioned before, that importance of training with increasing productivity, safety, reducing turnover, and improving well-being. So when we're looking at the training process, this gives you an example of on-the-job training, but regardless if it's on-the-job training or external training that you're providing, you really want to make sure that you're preparing. You want to make sure that you're taking time to do that, a timetable and set up a plan, determine what you need to train, talk to the employee that's receiving the training, make sure they're on board, make sure they understand the commitment that you're making and the plan that you're putting in place. Without putting this plan in place, it's very easy to talk about, yeah, we're going to show you that, I'm going to provide you some training on that. I'll show you how to do that a little bit more efficiently, or whatever the task may be. But without a plan, you can easily just get busy and not get back to fulfilling the commitment to provide the training. So make the plan and then make sure you follow through on the plan. The on-the-job training can, that's you or, a manager or supervisor providing that training to the person. Again, you want to make sure that this is structured, that you prepare the trainee, they know that that you're training them. You want to make sure that you're demonstrating the skill clearly and breaking it down into step-by-step tasks that are very clear. When you're the one that's done this work over and over again, it may be easy to make assumptions, but you want to think about every step that goes into doing the task and document it, and then share that with the trainee. The other thing that you want to make sure that you do is have that trainee demonstrate the skill back to you, maybe more than once, just to ensure that the information that you've shared with them has been received in the way that you want it to be. And like anything, once you're done the training, you want to ensure that you're checking back, making sure that it's what they needed, seeing what else they're going to need, document it and put it in their employee file that this has been done. You may need to repeat the training, just if it's something, especially if it's something that's not done on a regular basis. A task that's not done on a regular basis, you may want to go back and repeat and ensure that you're providing feedback about it as well. Another important area of managing your people is performance management. And sometimes this gets communicated in a way that it may seem like you're looking for ways to improve their performance, or that you might not be happy with something and that you're documenting a performance issue. But really, performance management is providing that feedback to your people and to your workers to ensure that they know that they are valued in your operation, and that the work that they're doing is valued as well. So performance management can really be used to determine that training needs for your workers. It can help a lot on your HR planning side of things by knowing where people are going, knowing where people are at with their training, where they would like to grow into, what opportunities there may be to move people up and promote people. So if you have a good performance management process in place, this will really have a positive impact on your planning. It also helps you recognize outstanding performance and accomplishments, and when needed, can help develop action plans or inform action plans for areas of improvement. Performance management is important so that you can make those clear links between your business goals and the individual goals of your workers. It encourages that development of knowledge, skills, and abilities. So again, it is showing your workers that you are committed to their development, and in turn, and many times, this will result in workers really taking ownership and looking for their own development opportunities as well. It promotes that worker engagement and your commitment to them. It does reduce turnover, and is usually reduces accidents, injuries, improves health and safety, and that type of thing as well. So the performance management process is really, again, you start with that groundwork, make sure you're prepared. You rate the performance, discuss the learning opportunities, mentor and follow up, and this is an ongoing cycle. So in that stage one, especially if this is something new for your operation, you want to make sure that you're working with your teams and with your individual workers to set the goals. They should be really part of this process all the way through. You want to be able to identify what you're trying to achieve through this process. What's the standard or expectation for the jobs and for the teams? What knowledge and skills and abilities are needed, and what development's needed. A lot of this will come from the job descriptions that you have, and your HR planning structure will inform things like the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So from job descriptions and HR planning, you should have a lot of this information already. You also want to think about the timing. So in many cases in farming, these things are done at the very beginning of the production cycle, because it can help set the expectations and goals for your workers to accomplish over the production cycle that you're just starting. When you're goal setting, I'm sure many of you have seen this type of structure, but you can use the SMART goal setting structure. So you want to make sure that the goals that you set are very specific, that they're measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound as well. And each of these steps are very important to think about as you do define the goals that are being set for your workers, to make sure that they have a clear direction as to what needs to be accomplished, but also a measurable way to know that the work that they're doing towards a goal can be measured, and you can really have a good way of knowing if it's been achieved or not. Time bound as well, you want to make sure that the things that you're setting are really, you can do short-term, long-term goals, but make sure that the ones that are long-term are identified as long-term, and that there are some short-term ones that you're able to measure against and say, yeah, you accomplished this over the season, or we can see an improvement here, or, you know, that kind of thing. You also want to be able to make sure that the structure you're putting in place for this performance management has a rating to it. Again, it's a way to provide feedback and show them where they are on the scale. And in that rating of the performance, you want to be able to identify what's acceptable and what can be improved on. And as you go through this process, you'll be able to also identify things that have changed and where improvement has happened. The timing of performance reviews and doing this should be really ongoing throughout the year, with a formal review at the end of that production cycle. So I always like to say, in teams that I've managed, if we get to the point where we're doing a more formal annual review and anything that we share with each other is a surprise at that time, then we haven't done a good job over the period between the beginning of that cycle and the end of the cycle in communicating with each other and providing feedback to each other. The formal process at the end of the cycle should be really just a recap of how things have gone. And there's lots of tools and resources for you available in the AGRHR toolkit. Again, you can download these and customize them to what you need. And there's information there as well to guide you on setting up the process, introducing it to your staff, and making sure that you have what you need in place for both you and your staff, and that this is a really positive management tool of your workforce. In that same section, there's a sample of on-the-job training, task tracking as well, and things like that that will help support training that might be identified through this process, and how to manage that and track that as well. So the next step is, one thing is, I will say on that evaluation side of things as well, you should ensure that the worker has an opportunity to feed into their own evaluation and do a bit of their own self-evaluation. And that can be a really good point for your discussion and help inform the conversation. You can see where they feel they're at. They've had time to reflect on the things that are going to be looked at as part of that performance review. In many cases, you'll find workers that aren't seeing themselves at doing as well as you can see them doing, and it's a great opportunity for you to share that feedback with them. But also, you know, it's a good way to identify areas that may need to be addressed. And again, in many cases, areas that you feel need to be improved on may be also identified, self-identified by the worker as well, and that just helps the conversation because they've had a chance to think about it, reflect on their own performance, and identify things that they're interested in improving on as well. And so as part of that, you want to make sure that you're discussing how you can provide learning opportunities, whether it's shadowing another worker, providing some mentorship, maybe it's providing manuals or technical support so that they can learn more information on how to do a specific task or how to manage a certain area. Attending conferences, webinars are also great. Getting opportunities for them to network with others in the industry, taking on extra tasks and providing in that on-the-job training are really good ways to provide those learning opportunities and develop your workers as well. And you'll see many of these ideas do not necessarily cost a lot of money from you know, a registration or paying for external training. They're really things that can be done within the operation that can go a long ways in supporting your workers and their development. And that monitoring and following up, like anything, you don't want to just have the conversation and say, okay, great, we've done that, let's have the same conversation next year. As I mentioned, you do want to make sure that you're creating a good environment where there's a comfort level for communication, and that you're managing your workers in a way that they're comfortable to come to you with questions, and that you're providing constructive feedback in a way that is going to have a positive impact on the workers so that they can respond to the feedback that's being provided. And when you're doing this follow-up as well, it's going to help support the idea that you are interested in their development, that you value the work that they're doing, and that the things you committed to in the conversation at the end of the review cycle are being actioned because you're following up throughout the year. And you're not just leaving the worker for a year hoping that they are improving in the areas that were suggested. For example, you're providing that feedback to them on an ongoing basis. They're hearing from you in area, you know, hey, you've really improved in this area. I know we talked about that a couple months ago. That's great. Keep up the good work. Things like this can go a long ways over the period of the year, and should be happening throughout the year, throughout the production cycle. So you don't get, as I mentioned, to that final, more formal review and feedback is surprising. Before you give before you actually have that more formal meeting, you do want to make sure that the worker is aware it's going to happen. You also want to make sure that it's a bit more formal so that they understand that this isn't just feedback that you're giving in the field, or, you know, driving from one location to the next in between doing tasks, anything like that. This is a bit more formal, and it doesn't have to be, you know, across the desk and sitting down in that way. It could be, you know, having a coffee and providing the feedback as well. But you want to ensure that it is done in a way that it's clear that this is part of the formal process. As I mentioned, you want to make sure that they have an opportunity to do a self-evaluation, have the conversation, look at previous evaluations, see where the improvements have made, and see where you can continue to develop your worker going forward, and where they are also interested in being developed. During the meeting, you want to make sure that they clearly understand the purpose of the meeting, and that everything will be kept confidential. And you do want to be able to start the meeting positively. You want to be able to identify the strengths and talk about the accomplishments, and then lead into some of the areas for improvement. Again, if you're prepared for the meeting and you think about some of the feedback that you need to give, you'll be able to give this feedback in a constructive, positive way, which will ensure that it's not taken in as much as a personal feedback, but as a constructive way to increase their skills and performance and that type of thing, setting out those expectations and how you're going to help them meet those expectations as well. And again, very important to ensure that they're part of that conversation and that they're part of the plans that are developed going forward. And after the meeting, we talked about this already a little bit, but making sure that that continued feedback is provided and that it is timely throughout the year. So when you are delivering that feedback, and again, a very important part of managing your workers, you want to make sure that you do have that formal feedback structure as we've just reviewed, but also that you're providing that informal feedback when it's you know, easy to do so. It can be unscheduled, it can be on the spot. You want to make sure that you're reinforcing what you're looking for in behaviors and the skills that are provided that you want to see. And when someone's going above and beyond as well, you want to make sure that you recognize that with, hey, I know you didn't need to work late tonight. Thanks so much for staying. Or I know you've got a lot on the go with your family, and I really appreciate that you put in the extra hours today because without you we wouldn't have finished harvest, whatever it might be that you have on the go. Making sure that you're giving that feedback to them so that they know their efforts are being recognized and valued as well. And giving feedback, it can be hard sometimes. And, certainly on the receiving end, not everyone wants to hear where they need improvement. And not everyone will agree with the areas that are identified that you feel that they need to have improvement. So you want to make sure as much as possible that you're prepared for the feedback that you're giving, even when it's in a more informal way. You want to think about the words that are going to come out. You want to make sure that you're providing the feedback in a way that is not emotional, not reactive. You want to maintain that open posture, make sure that you're listening to to your workers' input as well. You're actively listening and not interrupting. Tailor your language to your workers' level of understanding. Make sure that you're speaking clearly and frankly, and that you focus on the problem and not personalizing the issue. So again, good things to think about with this feedback, and goes a long way in the way that you manage your workers, making sure that the feedback's regular, positive and constructive, and specific. Now, we've talked a lot about, managing your workers in general. Now we're going to just focus a little bit on what happens when you're managing family. And many farm operations have family members working together. And it's very important that from an HR management point of view, that you have the HR management structure in place so that you have less conflicts and that you're very clear on your family time and the business time and how what people's role are in the business side of the operation. Because when you do have family working together, as you see with this, there's business, there's family, there's yourself, and that all comes together on the farm. So there's some real common challenges that come up when you're managing family specifically, and some of these challenges can be even more of a challenge when you have a combination of workers that are both family members and non-family members. So you want to make sure that you're not giving your family members special treatment. Examples of these could be, additional breaks, maybe they're getting bonuses where non-family members that are part of your team are not, maybe they're not up for overtime, maybe they get exempted from some of the dirty jobs or the tougher things, and you want to make sure that when you can, that you're remaining impartial to the family members, especially when they're working with other workers on the farm as well. And as much as possible, even though it can be difficult, you really want to focus on treating family members the same as everyone else that's there during your working hours. And so when you're trying to do this and trying to address this common challenge, there's some key questions you can ask yourself. You want to make sure that, as you're managing your team with a combination of family members and non-family members, that you're hearing the opinions and viewpoints from all staff and as much as possible from all staff equally. Do they all have the same chance for advancement, or are family members getting put ahead of someone else when all things being equal, maybe that non-family member has more experience or more expertise in an area and are being looked over for advancement. You also want to make sure that the promotion is based on their ability and not their family connection, and that you're communicating information to all workers. And this can be a real challenge. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But, especially if it's family members that are all living together, you may be having conversations about business over dinner, making decisions, and then forgetting to include the workers that weren't at your dinner table in those decisions or communication or even input into the decisions. and they can really feel like they're left out of the business process and that their input isn't as valued. Another challenge is letting everyone be the boss. So again, when you have family operations and with multiple family members, especially if this is an operation that has, maybe siblings and their families working together. So sisters and brothers, adult sister and brothers managing the farm operation equally. It can be really confusing if the structure isn't there where people's roles are very clear. And just like you would have in any operation that isn't run by family, you need to have an organizational structure and you need to have those roles of each person clearly defined in that organizational structure. This will really help in reducing frustration, reducing confusion. It will help the workers make sure that they know who they report to and who they need to answer to, so they're not feeling like they need to respond to anybody that's part of the family ownership team, for example. And so ways to make sure that you do address these situations or avoid the situations. Again, that clear chain of command, a good organizational chart where it's very clear who reports to who, as well as the job descriptions for every single person involved in the operation, and that includes all your family members as well. Having family arguments in public. Again, your family disagreements happen, it's really unavoidable. But having these disagreements in front of workers that are not part of the family or in front of clients or customers can really be detrimental. It can create an uncomfortable work environment for the workers that aren't part of the family, and it can really have an impact on their feeling of they don't want to be put in a situation where they feel like they need to take sides or anything like that, and it can really undermine the authority of not only yourself but the other family members involved in the disagreement. So again, to avoid these situations, you want to make sure that as much as possible you keep those disagreements behind closed doors. And if something does happen in front of workers and your staff, you want to minimize the use of strong words and try to be as constructive and productive in that conversation as you can be, and try to take it to a private area as soon as you can. Hiring and promoting family can be another challenge. Again, you don't want to put a person in a role that they're underqualified for. It happens a lot, but it's not going to be good for your business, and it's not going to be good for the person that you put in that role, because you're kind of setting them up for failure if they're not ready for it. And you could also risk not having your workers that are ready for the role and are not part of the family feel a bit discouraged or looking elsewhere for a job, and you may end up losing some really skilled and important members of your team because they're not feeling like they're having the same opportunity to be promoted. So again, to help avoid getting in these situations, you want to make sure that you're following a formal hiring process and interview process for all the vacancies that you're filling, and making sure you have multiple candidates in that process. If there is a relative that's underqualified for the job and they feel like they should get the job and they're applying for that, you have to have good communication with them and maybe look at another area where they could move into to help develop their skills and get them the experience that they need to move into the more senior role. But don't just put them in the role and hope that they're going to be okay, or put them in that role just because they're family. It's not going to work out well for you, for them, or for your operation. So then this brings us to communications, and whether you're managing family or you're managing a team of workers that are not family, effective communication is really important. And it really is a critical component to the success of any business. And it becomes even more important when you're talking about a family operation. Quite often that conversation between family is really informal, and it can really lead to misunderstandings, uncertainty, poor teamwork, and conflict. It can also lead to, in an environment where you have family members and non-family members on your team, there may be some assumptions that get missed by the non-family workers because they're not part of the family and they, don't know all the ins and outs of how things are done. Or, as I mentioned before, they might not have been part of that conversation around the dinner table, or after hours at a family gathering, which can happen. Those conversations can happen. So making sure that you have clear communication and ensuring that you're sharing that information with the entire team is really important. And if you have a formalized communication strategy, this can help. It helps remind you that you need to share information with everyone, not just your family members. It helps ensure that there's a way to get the information out to everyone. And it can also just help make sure that even within your family, that communication is clear and that you're not making assumptions not only with your non-family member workforce, but with your family members as well. It can also be beneficial to hold family meetings, and this can help put that formal business structure around the farm operation. It can also help ensure that business conversations are held within the business environment and reduce the amount of business conversations that might happen when you're, on the weekend doing social events or that kind of thing with your family. By having these family meetings as well, it provides a forum to share information, discuss areas of concern, sets up that expectation that there is this forum in place. And it also can help gain a better understanding for the business operations, and everyone can hear and be part of that decision-making process as well. You also want to make sure that you're establishing good communication guidelines. Again, this is important no matter what the makeup is of the team that you're managing. Becomes more important when you are managing a business that has a family as employees. So taking a look at some of the guidelines that can help with your communication, you want to make sure that you set out how and when information is shared, the rules for communicating, which I think is really important, especially with family, because can be that level of comfort and familiarity where you may provide feedback to them in a way that is not as constructive and positive as you may take the time to step back and provide feedback to a non-family member. So you want to make sure that you're practicing the same type of communication skills and approaches that you would provide to anyone, whether they be a family member or not. And you also want to make sure that within your family structure, especially if there's multiple family members that are part of the management team, you want to make sure that you identify who informs the workers, how the information is shared, and so that you're not miscommunicating, communicating ahead of when it was supposed to be shared, sharing information with only a few workers and not everyone. Again, the communication strategies and having guidelines are very important, whether it be managing family or managing a work environment that has non-family workers. You also want to make sure that you're taking time to set shared goals and objectives. Again, this is under managing family communications, but it needs to apply to any workforce that you're managing. You want to make sure that the workers have input to the long-term goals, short-term goals, and objectives of the operation, that you're sharing the vision and the mission, that you know those long-term goals and you know what you need to do to achieve it. This may be something that, in any work environment, workers can feed into. And if you have family members, you want to make sure that they're part of this process and conversation as well. So those are just some highlights of things that you need to consider when you're managing workers on the farm. As I mentioned, there is a lot of tools and resources to help you manage your workers provided to you through the AGRA HR Toolkit. as a member of the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, who is a partner with us, and we're very happy to have as a partner, you have free access to this resource. So you can access that by going to the HR Toolkit website and clicking on the button that says subscribe now. You will then be taken to a page where you'll click on buy now. And then that's where you put in your code, which will provide you with free access to the toolkit for the year. And once you do this and register, you're able to access this information throughout the year, go in and out as much as you need, download anything that you need. It's there for you for the year. So that wraps up managing workers on your farm. And I think we have a few minutes for questions if anyone has any questions to ask.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, you could put them in the chat or the Q&A, or you could raise your hand. Oh, we have one in the Q&A. How do I find the templates?
Once you go into the AgriHR toolkit, actually I could flip in there now if that, just to give a little bit of a demonstration, because that's a good question. It looks a little bit overwhelming, but once you're in, it's really easy. So I'm just going to share my screen. So you put in, once you register, you'll have a username and password, and you can log in. You'll be taken into the toolkit. Along on the left-hand side here, can you all see this?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. On the left-hand side here, there's information that is organized by topic, and you can click on here. On each topic, you'll get an overview of what's covered in the topic, as well as sections for specific topics, and every section has right at the top tools and templates. So you click on that and you'll see everything that you need here to download. It's all in Word documents, so once you download it, you can customize it for whatever you need. So if we look at worker performance, which is what we were focused on today, just see here. All right. Worker performance, tools and templates. Your job breakdown sheet. These are things if there's if you need to suspend or terminate as well. But there is also the performance management tools and templates, which I thought were in there. But they may be under. Maybe under the workforce management side. Yeah. But yeah, that just shows you where everything is and provides you with lots of different information that you can download. The policy handbook as well is just under HR policies, and you can see the employee handbook, which again, there it is. You can download it. It's a Word document. You can put your logo on it. You can customize it to what meets your work environment as well. So lots of resources there.
That's great. Thanks, Jen.